I was the first independent contractor in the history of professional wrestling that negotiated an employee contract. And it wasn't very well known back in 1992 when I negotiated the contract, but I was being offered a chance to go to what's now WWE, to become Bobby Heenan's protege. And the whole idea was after a year or two, I would screw Bobby Heenan, not literally, but figuratively. Though, I would screw Bobby Heenan out of the Heenan family and make it the Heyman family. And do, when I turned Cornette babyface in WCW, I would do the same thing in WWE. I would turn Bobby Heenan babyface, and I would be the heel against Bobby Heenan. And it was the offer of a lifetime. Bobby Heenan was, and remains to this day, the single greatest manager of all time. To such a degree, by the way, that I didn't want to be a manager. The first time I had the leverage to change the name of the role, I changed the name. Well, even back in WCW, I tried to be the CEO of the Dangerous Alliance. When I was first with Brock, I wanted to be his agent, if you remember that. And then I finally just said, listen, we're never going to use the name manager to describe me. I'm not a manager, I'm an advocate. And I insist on the name of that role because I don't want to be a manager, because that role was perfected by Bobby Heenan. And I'm the first advocate. So all other advocates have to follow what I've done, and I would suggest they have a tall task ahead of them. I had an employee contract with WCW. Bill Watts came in after Kip Fry. He did not like this concept. He did not like the precedent that it was setting. And Bill Watts was never going to be paid on the performance of WCW. So he cut a deal to where he got a percentage of the costs that he cut. So by way of example, if Bill Watts could cut my contract by $100,000, Bill Watts made $10,000 on me. And he tried to do this to a lot of people. He tried to do this to me. He tried to do this to Rick Rude. He tried to do this to Brian Pillman. And there were several others that walked out and several others that took it because his threat was, I will cut you, I will job you out, I will ruin your value, and you'll take it if you stay at the salary, or you'll take a pay cut and I'll push you. And that just didn't fly with me. I didn't like being threatened. And he was, to be very honest, he was a xenophobe, he was a racist, and he was an anti-Semite. And I didn't like him. I really didn't like him. And I thought he was a and he was a bully. And he was a bully, and this goes way too deep for this conversation, but my mother, who's no longer with us, was a Holocaust survivor. My mother was in Auschwitz and Bergen-Belsen. And so I grew up in a household that, number one, I never feared anything, because no matter what I ever went through in my life would be nothing compared to what my mother went through. And number two, I will stand up in the face of a bully or anti-Semitism, the likes of which you would not believe how a pussy like me, how hard I can fight when I see racism or xenophobic or anti-Semitic attitudes. I will fight that to the death. And I stood up to him, and I was fired I was, just for the record, I was fired because I was accused of falsifying my expense reports, which was such bullshit. And it was a set-up charge. And I documented that it was bullshit. I filed a lawsuit against WCW and Turner Broadcasting, which was settled out of court. And because they don't own the company anymore, and because it's, oh my God, it's 25 years ago now almost. I'm not supposed to really discuss the fact that we settled it out of court, but it's 23 years ago, they can sue me now. We settled it out of court, and I made a load of money on it, which allowed me to work for free in ECW for 7 years. So that's why I was out of WCW, because I got fired because I wouldn't bow down and blow Bill Watts. Not literally, again, though if you think about it. Hook him up. That was Bill Watts. For those of you who don't laugh at that joke, and I understand why, because you probably don't remember Bill Watts when he was a worker, because he was a anyway. That was his big thing. Hook him up, and everybody said, "Yeah, off." and I proved that their allegation was bull. And I won this huge settlement out of court with them. As for, and here it comes. Oh, I know this is what so many people are waiting for. Jim Cornette. I know that you've heard Jim Cornette's side of everything, and he's welcome to his side. And this is what I can say about the differences in philosophy with me and Jim Cornette. Jim Cornette would probably not argue with this assessment of himself. Jim Cornette wishes wrestling would be today how it used to be. And a lot of people may feel that way, but it's never going to be the way it used to be. And you can dream about it and bitch about it and complain about it all you want. It's not going to happen. It's just not. Maybe you can implement some of the concepts that made him a fan back in those days, but it's never going to be the 1980s again. It's never going to be the 1990s again. It's not going to be the turn of the millennium again. It's not even going to be 2015 again. I accept the reality of the year that we're in. And I don't have to have wrestling be the way it used to be. I have to figure out something to sell to those in the position of power to make the decisions that's acceptable to them in terms of marketing this billion-dollar industry. And I have to sell them something that I enjoy, that I like to do, that I want to be a part of. And then I have to sell it to them so that they see the money in the concept. Now, does that mean it has to be the way that probably none of us like? No, I will never pitch the general manager concept. Why? Because I don't frickin' like it. But I can pitch something like Brock breaking the streak, or someone beating Brock with one move and shocking the... Not that I'm pitching that as the finish, by the way. So please don't... Heyman just gave away the finish to SummerSlam. But I can pitch things that I believe work in today's environment. Jim Cornette is a lot like Vader. He just doesn't see what pleases the audience today is what's going to be sold today. And I will always be accepting of the fact that times change, and either I change with it. Hello. Ladies and gentlemen, your sound guy, Vader. And either I'm accepting of the fact that times change, or I become irrelevant in today's industry, and I have strived to be very relevant in today's industry, which is why I remain accepting of the fact that styles and the presentation of the product will progress and change. That's the only criticism. I don't even know if that's criticism of Jimmy. That's how Jimmy sees things. He wishes things the way they used to be. I know that they never will be. I'm accepting of the fact that to be relevant, you have to accept change.